Before Columbus's discovery of America, over 2,200 indigenous peoples lived across the American continent. In the 17th and 18th centuries, conflicts with Native Americans were periodic, often arising over land, boundaries, and goods. Europeans plundered Native American settlements, and the indigenous population saw a drastic decline, partly due to epidemics, as Europeans introduced numerous diseases to which Native Americans had no immunity. In the 19th century, once independent and more fortified, the United States began to implement a more systematic anti-Native American policy. Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. Today, we will discuss where the Native Americans disappeared to in the USA and where they live now. Enjoy the video. In the USA, relatively few Native American tribes survived, and the horse-riding natives of America are still seen as primitive gatherers and hunters. White settlers drove the remaining Native American tribes to the most inhospitable lands, supposedly to help the unfortunate savages and introduce them to civilization. In reality, Native Americans had their own civilization, which could not withstand the arrival of Europeans. Before Columbus, approximately 112 million people lived in America, composed of proud and beautiful native tribes. The white settlers defeated Native American warriors because the indigenous people did not possess firearms. However, during the early stages of the conquest of America, the imbalance in military power was not significant. While musketeers were busy reloading their muskets, Native Americans would shower them with sharp arrows, often leading to victory on their side. For this reason, the colonization of the overseas lands proceeded slowly, and even in the first quarter of the 17th century, North America was home to only around 2,000 European settlers. Before 1867, when multi-shot rifles were introduced to the American Army, Native Americans had military superiority over white settlers. In addition to rifles, white settlers began using cannons and rapid-fire weapons, which turned the battles into massacres of defenseless Native Americans. However, at the start of the 17th century, Native Americans still weren't afraid of Europeans. They could afford to interact with the white settlers from a position of strength, negotiating, trading, and engaging in relations. They continued to reject settlement on their land but were open to engaging in trade with foreigners. Smallpox and measles were very common diseases in Europe, and Europeans had developed some immunity to them. The settlers unknowingly brought these deadly diseases with them, along with other dangerous bacteria and viruses causing diseases like measles, hepatitis, and other contagious illnesses. Millions of Native Americans died due to these epidemics. In 1616, a French ship sank near Cape Cod, and local Native Americans rescued the surviving sailors and settled them in their villages. As a result, each village ended up with at least one foreigner who was possibly infected with hepatitis. The disease spread with astounding speed, and from 1616 to 1619, 90% of the population in that region perished. The healthy survivors fled in panic, abandoning the dying, who were left to be eaten by vultures and other predators. Native Americans were completely defenseless against foreign diseases. Europeans soon realized that the Native Americans were dying from diseases brought over from Europe. They then began deliberately using biological warfare against the indigenous tribes. The results were devastating. The weakened tribes were unable to resist, and in helpless despair, they watched as the audacious settlers established their settlements and moved further into the continent. When mass immigration to North America began, very few indigenous people remained, and the newcomers believed they were occupying uninhabited, empty land. After the United States won the war for its independence, the primary goal of the new government was to expand its territory by driving Native Americans from their land to the northwest of the Ohio River. This process included the removal of Native Americans who had been allies of the United States and had fought alongside them against Great Britain. The U.S. government, under the leadership of George Washington, expected a quick and easy victory over the Native Americans, who were still living under a primitive communal system. However, the war, known as the Northwest Indian War, lasted 10 years, from 1785 to 1795, and became the longest war in U.S. history until the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. European settlers disrupted the natural balance of the lands they were settling. They burned trees and bushes, and in place of the native vegetation, they planted new species. Animals, such as bison, which Native Americans had traditionally hunted, proliferated uncontrollably. The population of bison grew to around 60 million, and these animals trampled over the meadows, disrupting the environment. According to a 1825 law, Native Americans lost their land if it was opened up by U.S. citizens. In 1830, large-scale relocation of Native American tribes to empty and unattractive lands began. By 1867, this relocation became formalized, and Native Americans were moved to reservations, often on infertile land, such as near the Canadian border. Native Americans were forced to sign treaties, granting them land, but as soon as valuable resources like gold were discovered on those lands, white settlers arrived, and Native Americans were forced to sign new, even more unfavorable treaties. It turned out that the Native American population had declined from around 2 million to just 300,000. From this, it is often concluded that 90% of Native Americans were killed by Americans. At the local level, bounty rewards were offered for the killing of Native Americans. In Chases the City, California, authorities paid $5 for an Indian's head. In 1855, a settlement near Maurice Villa, and in 1859, paid bounties from local donations for every scalp or other proof that a Native American had been killed. In 1861, in the Tacoma district, there were plans to establish a fund to pay for Native American scalps, and 2 years later, in Haney-Lake, they offered 25 cents for a scalp. The Indian Citizenship Act, passed in 1924, finally granted Native Americans the right to be recognized as U.S. citizens. Today, there are around 560 Native American tribes recognized by the federal government. Legally, reservations have the same rights as U.S. states, and those who have been able to prove that the government took their ancestors' property may be entitled to subsidies and grants. In the 1990s, Native Americans were granted the right to open casinos on their reservations and sell alcohol and tobacco products without excise taxes. This measure helped increase the wealth of some tribes. However, around a quarter of Native American tribes still live below the poverty line. In 2009, the U.S. Congress officially apologized to Native Americans for the numerous instances of violence, mistreatment, and neglect that they had suffered at the hands of U.S. citizens. In conclusion, the overall population of Native Americans from 1500 to 1900 decreased from 15 million to 237,000. However, the Native American population has been growing again today, although sadly, most have forgotten their cultural traditions and customs. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave a comment about which historical figure you would like to see a video about. Good luck, and see you soon.